Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's talking about the Beatles again. And I know I've talked a lot about the Beatles in the last week. It makes sense. I love the Beatles. We're sort of living through a Beatles moment. So I thought, why not do something that a lot of people have been telling me isn't necessary? That is yet another ranking, another Beatles list. But let me tell you what the point is of what I'm doing. You see, most of my viewers, statistically, are in their 20s. And most of the original fans of the Beatles, the original Beatlemaniacs, are sadly dying off. Okay, they're old. Okay, that includes my parents, who saw the Beatles at Carnegie Hall at a show that John Lennon said was terrible and they were treated like animals. And all my dad ever told me about it was that he remembers watching the dust fly off of the balconies. So I'm sort of in this middle generation between the original Beatles generation and the current generation. And I think that I can bring some interesting perspective. I'm somebody who is a complete mega fan, but at the same time, I understand the kind of boomer self-obsession annoyingness that can often surround the Beatles. They were on their first show in America. Their performance on Ed Sullivan was 13 years before I was born. And I was 13 years old when I saw my first concert, which was Paul McCartney. So there I am, just a perfect Generation Xer in between the Zoomers and the Boomers. And so that's sort of the way that I'm thinking of this tier list. It's for Beatles fans, but it's also for the Beatles curious, you know? And I should say that Beatles fans and I have a rough relationship, it turns out. So I released what I believed to be an extremely loving take on the new song, which I don't think is a Beatles song. They didn't like that. I had some criticisms about its production. They didn't like that. And I'd like to repeat what I said, because this is called the brutal Beatles tier list, okay? I'm intentionally going to be brutal in my assessment. I'm doing this on purpose to make it more interesting, to make it more engaging, and most importantly, to make it more honest. If you think that slavish devotion is the same thing as love, there's no reason to watch this video, okay? If you're one of those many people who told me that I don't understand the Beatles, or that I hate Paul, or someone told me that they feel sorry for the people around me. They asked me if my kids even love me. Most recently, I just got 3 letters KYS, which, if you're older than 20, means kill yourself. Nice. This is one of my absolute favorite bands. I don't do tier lists for all my favorite bands. This is my third. I've done Radiohead and Kanye, my 2 other favorite bands. And so this is the thing. If you can't handle negative things said about the Beatles or any of your favorite musicians or artists, it means a couple things. One, you don't love the Beatles. I'm sorry, you don't. That's not what you love. What you love is what you think loving the Beatles says about you. Your love of the Beatles is about your memories. It's I, me, mine, okay? The second thing that it means is just click off the video. Go watch some other stuff. There's some great reaction videos to the new song of people just crying and singing sha-la-la, and that's great. And I want to give you an example that's personal to me, okay? Because as an Xer, my Beatles are not a music group. It's a movie. It's the Star Wars movies, okay? My love of the original Star Wars trilogy is the same kind of love that many people have for the Beatles. What I want to do is I want to talk to you about the kind of criticism that I think is useful and the kind that is not in relationship to, let's say, Return of the Jedi. If you haven't seen Return of the Jedi, it's my personal favorite Star Wars movie. I saw it when I was 6 years old and I played with the little toys, and isn't it fun having all this great memory, right? That's the way that we think about memory. That's the way that we think about nostalgia. And while I was growing up, I heard a lot of people who were a little bit older than me bellyaching about the Ewoks. The Ewoks are cheesy. The Ewoks are lame. That, in my opinion, that's just a judgment call. And if I were 10 years older, I would have thought they were lame. If I were 30 years older, I would have thought they were cool. That's not the kind of analysis that I think is useful. But when I grew up, I started to hear people make other criticisms of Return of the Jedi that were useful. My favorite movie, the movie that made me remember being a kid in my backyard and playing with the biker scouts and boom, boom, boom. Harrison Ford's acting is terrible in that movie. It's terrible. It's unwatchable. He is a great actor, but he is terrible in that movie. If you can't hear that and accept it, that you love a movie and the movie is great, and some of the aspects of that movie are bad, then I would argue you don't actually love the movie. You remember playing in your backyard, eating Oreos for dinner. Okay? So, with that in mind, let's talk to who this is really about, because this is not about the generational divide. It's more about trying to do what I can, because what's the point of doing a Beatles tier list video? You know, like, you have to have an angle. Everyone, well, okay, first of all, you don't have to have an angle. I watch so many of these things from people who I don't even know. Okay, if you love the Beatles like I love the Beatles, you will watch people talk about them. Just who cares? Because what else are you doing, right? Like, you can watch The Office, or you can watch someone talk about the Beatles, right? The same kind of comfort. At least that's how I feel. What I'm thinking is not just Zoomers or millennials or Xers or hell, even boomers. Like, the Beatles can be so overwhelming. Their omnipresence can be so oppressive. It can be so easy just to say, I don't like, I don't know, I don't like. And that's my real challenge. If you're watching this and you are not already a Beatles fan, that's my challenge to you. The way to think about the Beatles is not, are they a good band? That's like saying, is Shakespeare a good playwright? I don't know how to, you can tell I'm having a little bit of trouble with with my camera here, but it doesn't matter. You're just listening to my voice. You know, is Shakespeare a great playwright? Much like the Beatles, Shakespeare is so heavy. Everything around him, it can be so difficult to have an entry point. You remember in high school not understanding. And the thing is that learning to love Shakespeare is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It is the genius of humanity, somebody who is capable of doing something that allowed you to connect to something so true and so human in a way that nobody has since, and probably nobody ever will. That's the level that the Beatles are on. And if you don't get it, that must be very alienating. So I want to try to help you. You know, we're talking about the genius of humanity. If there's one thing my entire channel is actually about, it's not actually about new music or all that stuff. It's about the genius of humanity. That's what my life is dedicated to. That's what I want to do, right? That's what I want to share. And much like Shakespeare, okay, much like Picasso, all right, much like any of these, Playboy Cardi, much like any artist, any human creator, the more you give to it, the more you study it, the more you open yourself to it, the better your life is. You can be a hater, hate all you want. The Beatles are lame. I totally pooned you. Or you can open yourself to their beauty. Now, listen, realistically, Mike the Snare, he's a young guy. He's probably a Zoomer or young millennial. He did a video, deep discog dive on the Beatles. It's great. It's an hour long. He does a lot of what I'm trying to do here. I come at it from a little bit different angle. But I'm not even the only person to try to do this. He does a great job of helping to contextualize things for younger people. But let me just do a little bit of like jamming, okay? Let me do a little bit of jamming, try to figure out how maybe I can help you better understand the Beatles in a way that's perhaps more relatable. Those of you who are younger than 30, okay? Or younger than 40. First of all, they're kind of a socialist band. Yes, they're a great capitalist and they're selling stuff all over the place, but they are such a collective. They are such an example of collective brilliance, of each individual member being crucial to what they are doing. They are not individuals. And the thing is, their fame was so great, their genius was so tremendous, and yet they never really truly fell apart. They came close, but as human beings, they all managed to live. And why did they live when Elvis Presley couldn't? When Michael Jackson couldn't? When Prince couldn't? Because they were at the height of the point where you would be torn apart. They were four people together. Now, I'm going to say something, the first kind of controversial thing I'm going to say, which is that it is a band of four people with two incontestable geniuses, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. See George back there, you might be mad because you might think George is a genius. I would say he is a contestable genius, okay? He may be a genius songwriter, but I don't think he's on the same level as John and Paul, realistically. But what I want to do is I want to give you a permission. If you are a Beatles hater, I'm going to give you permission to be a Beatles hater. But you have to do homework first. Okay? So this is your homework. You will get the Professor Sky lifelong stamp, the ability to tell people that you don't like the Beatles if you can do the following thing. Listen to a Beatles song and tell me who is singing it. If you can tell the difference between the singers, that means you know the difference between the songwriters. That means you understand the art well enough to say that you don't like it. You can't say you don't like Shakespeare if you've never tried to understand what he's writing, if you've never tried to understand the way that he writes or the emotions he was trying to hit at. You just can't do it. You don't have permission. So you just say, I don't know about Shakespeare. And that's a totally fine answer. I don't mind if you spend the rest of your life say, I don't really know the Beatles. I don't really like what I've heard, but I don't really know them. That's totally acceptable. It reminds me a lot of art. As an example, abstract expressionists like Mark Rothko, great big sort of like 1 or 2 color paintings with rectangles, or Pollock throwing the paint around. I've taken many students to museums, and many of them all say the same thing. I don't like it. I could do it. I don't like it. I can do it. No, it's not that you don't like it. It's not that you can do it. It's that your ignorance is so great that it makes you feel shame. You have permission to dislike modern art when you understand it. Okay? Because this is the thing. This is what the whole channel, in addition to being about the greatness of humanity, it's about the relationship to ignorance that we have. Most of the time I'm on here, I'm talking about artists that I don't know about, okay? I talked about Ken Carson for an hour last week. I don't know anything about that guy or about where he comes from or anything, okay? This is an example where I'm trying to maybe change the people's relationship to their ignorance of the Beatles, because that's the thing. Either on any topic, and I remind you, ignorance is not an insult. Ignorance just means, to its Greek root, not knowing, okay? There's nothing wrong with not knowing things. In fact, not knowing things is how we define our intelligence, okay? That's the way that that's why Plato's last word means Socrates' last words were, all I know is that I know nothing. Why the smartest person in humanity said that is because acknowledging and accepting your ignorance is the only path to wisdom. So if you are Beatles curious or a Beatles hater, come along with me, okay? Because I'm sure it's possible to hate the Beatles if you really know them, but I'm not. I legitimately don't know if it's possible to understand and know the Beatles music and dislike it. I don't know if it's possible. Now, what if you're somebody who likes the Beatles and you can't tell the difference between the 4 singers? I don't care. That doesn't matter. You can just enjoy it. That doesn't, enjoyment doesn't require any kind of permission, I don't think. But when it comes to a great work of art, you need to understand it before you can say you don't like it. I try to come up with all these little metaphors here because I'm just having fun. It's all I've been doing for like the last week. I should be doing so much research I should be doing as a professor, but what the hell? I'm talking about the Beatles. It gives you so much when you love the Beatles. I compare it to liking Japanese food. I didn't like Japanese food my whole life. I used to not like sushi, and then I learned to appreciate it. The different tastes, the different styles, and nigiri, hand rolls, and I started to appreciate the different textures and tastes and different levels of quality. My whole life got so much richer. That's what I say to you, oh, ignorant of the Beatles. Your life can be so much richer. So, shall we get into it? All right. I'm not even at the tier list yet, but let's talk about the Beatles individually. I got my little toys here. All right. So we got John. Okay. I'm going to be talking about all 4 of them because the most important thing to understand about them is that they are 4 in 1 and they are 1 in 4. The Trinity is one of the primary concepts of the Bible, and it forces you to understand that God is 3 things and God is 1 thing at once. I'm not saying that the Beatles are better than or greater than God, but I am saying that it is a similar thing, where to understand and love the Beatles is to understand 4 things at the same time as you understand 1. Okay, so I want to give you some ways of understanding the difference between these 4 blurry people. God damn, I hate this camera. So John, the best way I like to think about John, he's metallic, he's sharp, He's poetic. He's a jealous lover. If I had to, for you Zoomers, give you an internet archetype, he is very much the alpha Chad of the group. Okay, he has a lot of those characteristics. And if you don't know what that means, don't look it up. It's a bunch of hooey. Maybe some of you are a little bit older and you know enough about Harry Potter to know about the different Harry Potter houses. Now, I completely disavow Harry Potter because of the odious nature of its creator. But I just realized while getting ready for this video that each of the Beatles totally fits into one of the Hogwarts houses. And if you're a Beatles fan and you're a Harry Potter fan and you're at home and you're watching, right now you're going through the list and you're like, oh, that totally works. Total Slytherin. Okay, we got John, the total Slytherin. We then, of course, have Paul, Mr. Blurry Paul, right here. His material's not metallic. He's fine cloth. He's softer, just as poetic, but he's not a jealous lover. He's not a bad boy. He's a romantic lover. He's sort of a beta, I guess you could say, kind of lovey-dovey. An important thing about Paul, too, is he is, as you kids would say, low-key weird. A lot of stuff about Paul is secretly weird, but he seems like such a normie you wouldn't believe it. Oh, such a Gryffindor. You look at his tie. Even his tie is Gryffindor, okay? I also like to compare the sound of their voices, because that's my homework for you, is to be able to know the difference between their voices. John's voice tastes of blood. That metallic, semi-sweet, sour sound. Paul's voice sounds of honey. It tastes of honey. Okay? Now that leaves us with the two other Beatles. George, I would say his material is not cloth or metallic. I'd say he is a jasmine flower. He is the ultimate outsider. He was too young for the rest of the band. My favorite thing about George is that he lays bare the current state of spirituality. He is simultaneously the most materialist member of the Beatles and the most spiritual. And that battle is a contradiction that lives within all of us. And we can live through that battle just by listening to George Harrison's music. And we can laugh at him for being such a hypocrite and then look in the mirror and laugh at ourselves. Total Sigma energy on this guy. You can't, it's, now that I've said it, I'm just like, oh my God, it totally works. He's like that too cool for an outsider. Like if someone tells you that George is their favorite Beatle, like it tells you a lot. And of course, that means he's Ravenclaw. He's totally Ravenclaw. Like a little bit too smart, a little bit nerdy. And his voice doesn't taste of blood, doesn't taste of honey. It tastes of chocolate orange. You know, those weird little candies that are like oranges and chocolate at the same time? Which leaves us with Ringo. He's not cloth or jasmine flower or metallic. He is a dog's ear. That's how he feels. He's not as much a creator as he is the ultimate facilitator. He is one of the best drummers in the world for reasons that I'm not going to get into. There are many good videos on YouTube about why he's such a good drummer. But he also has a lot of what I would call Yogi Berra wisdom. He's full of maxims. He has a kind of simple wisdom to him at all times. I suppose that would make him a Zeta male, but I don't really know if there's more than 3 of those things. And I think by now you can figure out that makes him a perfect Hufflepuff. Simple, true, good. All right? Oh, and his voice tastes like Heinz baked beans. All right. So does that help you to understand? I know I'm speaking very poetically, but I think I'm getting to something here. I hope that helps you to understand that all 4 of these things at one, the chocolate orange and the baked beans and the honey and the blood, and they all go together in this amazing potpourri, this amazing taste, this touch of a dog's ear and jasmine flower and metal and cloth, it's all there. And really what makes it so fascinating is these 3 songwriters, John, Paul, and George, what makes them so fascinating is how different they are, yet how compatible they are. It's like they are, all 3 of them, masters of writing simple pop songs that just go straight to it and get to you. At the same time, they are masters of going avant-garde and trying to expand art, but in totally different ways. John tries to get into art rock. Paul tries to get in this like orchestral pop while accidentally inventing heavy metal in a way. And then George takes all these Indian influences and throws them all in. Like at the same time, they're all creating and they're all going in these different directions, and they can all do these things at the same damn time. backed up by the masterful production of George Martin, who was in his 30s. It's just depressed. That's how young the Beatles were when they did what they did is one depressing thing. But how young George Martin was to be the old guy in the room is even more depressing. He and the Beatles also, and I could spend a whole video just talking about the recording techniques, all the backwards sounds they invented, how they produced the sounds, the orchestration, everything. And what I really want to do is to try to explain to you how the Beatles are not comparable to anything that exists right now. There is nothing that comes close. There has been nothing that comes close. Don't come at me with U2 or the Rolling Stones. It just doesn't match up. I tried to imagine in terms of cultural impact, because the thing about the Beatles is they were the biggest Justin Bieber boy band in the world, while simultaneously being the most influential movers of art in the world. In the span of 7 years, they managed to do all of that, which makes me realize to have a modern equivalent of the Beatles, we would need to have a human being who is a perfect hybrid of all the good and bad traits of Taylor Swift, matched with all of the good and bad traits of Kanye West. Imagine Taylor West, Kanye Swift as a single person, and there's 4 of them. That's the Beatles. That's how impossibly amazing they were. Much like Taylor Swift and Kanye West, part of what made them so fascinating is that even though they were used by the machine, they were never quite of the machine. They drove the machine more than the machine drove them. So have I got you hooked? Have I got you hooked, Zoomers? We're talking about Hogwarts and beta males, okay? Talking Tay-Tay and Yay Yay, all right? In the event that you don't want to go through this whole thing, you want to have a TLDL playlist, okay? If you want to get into the Beatles, I'm going to make you a little tiny playlist, okay? It's going to be 6 songs long. I'm going to include a link to it. And if you just need to get into just their best music that I think will appeal most to people whose taste might be similar to mine and watch my other videos, track 1, Don't Let Me Down. One of my favorite Beatles songs, a song I didn't know very well because it wasn't on their albums. We'll talk about that in a second. An absolute rocker, a complete and total rocker that has this raw, beautiful sound, beautiful singing, amazing energy. Track 2, Day in the Life. Along with Bohemian Rhapsody, I think Day in the Life and Bohemian Rhapsody are the only 2 perfect songs in pop culture, in the 20th century. Just and Welcome to the Terror Dome by Public Enemy, but that's very anti-Semitic, so there's a little problem there. But I'd say those are sort of like the 3 perfect songs that I can think of, like epic, beautiful songs. Then if you want to get more into the avant-garde stuff, track number 3 is going to be Tomorrow Never Knows, a song that was so far ahead of its time, it's hard to understand. Speaking of that, track 6, 1, 2, 3. Track 4, Helter Skelter, a Paul song where he basically tried to invent heavy metal because he wanted to prove that he could. Track 5, Only a Northern Song, a George banger that's just, as you kids like to say, it just goes hard. It has all these weird sounds. The thing is that the Beatles were not only pop innovators, but they were indie innovators as well. And then, of course, the final track, Yellow Submarine, because that's my favorite Beatles song. Because my mom used to sing it to me when I was a baby. Okay, so that's my reason for that being my favorite song. I could come up with other reasons. Oh, the chord progression's fascinating, and the way that they sing. No, that's why it's my favorite. And I sang it at my own wedding. All right. Oh, geez. Oh, no. What happened here? Am I still recording? What just happened there? I'm still recording, right? Yeah, I'm recording. Sorry, I just hit the wrong button on my computer. All right, so let's get going here. Let's get to the tier list. Now, why do I call this the brutal tier list? Because I'm a teacher, okay? And when you're a teacher, you have to be part of what's called grade inflation, okay? Let's go, Brandon, on this grade inflation because it's major, all right? I inflate grades so hard, okay? It's so hard to get lower than a B in one of my classes. Most of my students, if they do the work, they get the A. But that's not interesting because every single Beatles album, all 13 of their albums, are 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. Okay. All 13 of their albums on any other tier list would be A tier or S tier, which if you're not if you don't know about tiers, those are the two highest tiers. Okay. But what's the interest in that? Let's be like a French grader. Okay. If you don't know, the French grade out of 20, and if you get a 12 out of 20, you're happy. 20 out of 20 is a statistical anomaly. Basically, no one gets 20 out of 20. All right. So let's evaluate the Beatles like that. What is the fun of just saying this is the greatest and this is the greatest? Let's actually be brutal. Let's see if we hold it to the absolute highest standards. And again, I'm saying standards. These are all my opinions. It doesn't seem like it because I talk like they're not, but I know they're just my opinions. It's possible that you don't have the same opinions as I do, which is totally cool, man. You know, we're talking about 7 years of albums. We're talking, do you remember when Trump was elected? If Trump was, the day that Trump was elected is the year the first album came out, then right now would be the day that the 13th album came out. All right. That's how short of a period of time all this music was made. What's funny is I was making this list, and this morning I just decided, while hanging around with my baby, to listen to the albums on the bottom of the list. And I was like singing along to every word. I found all these little details I hadn't noticed, just like Paul's voice on the song Things We Said Today on an album that I have ranked really low. Like, I started to lose my nerve. And then my wife came down and she's like, Sky, they don't have a worst album. But this is the thing. If you love something, you need to be critical of it. You do. You need to. Slavish devotion is not true love. Critical analysis is love. So I'm going towards that richness. Realistically, when we look at this list, it is weighted towards the second half of their career. In the beginning, they were basically a singles band that had albums. Some of those albums had filler. Some of them were covers. They grew and grew and grew. They grew so fast, it's incomprehensible, so that the second half of their work is generally better. What surprised me, and I mean really surprised me, is when I went into this whole project, I said, there's going to be 2 S tier. That's the top tier, right? It goes S, A, B, C, D. Okay, that's the order. I don't know why S is the top, but it is. I knew that there would be 2 S tier albums, and then the rest I didn't know. But as I analyzed it, I discovered there are 3 S tier albums. Except one of the 2 that I thought would be S tier is actually A tier. So I am learning a lot. So now I'm going to show you the tier list. And do I need to apologize to you? You see, this is the thing. I'm trying to be a funny guy. Okay? I'm trying to be a funny guy with this. So I made a tier list in which, instead of naming them S, A, B, C, D, as you can see, I tried to name them using Zoomer slang. So S tier is GOAT, greatest of all time. W. A tier is lit AF. B tier is it slaps, parentheses, no cap. C tier is sus, not the best, TBH. And then D, low key, this ain't it. My daughter helped me with that last one. Okay, so I'm going to be making the most insufferable tier list of Beatles albums just based on this. And if you like this whole idea, put on AVAA somewhere in a comment. I will heart any comment that says that. Smash the like bucket, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I'm going to be doing that new Aesop Rock album soon. I can't wait. Oh, I do have a sponsor for this video too. Gun control. We need more gun control because guns killed John Lennon. Don't vape. Stay away from tobacco products. Those killed George Harrison. Okay? George Harrison wasn't killed by a knife. Someone broke into his house and almost stabbed him to death. If he had a gun, he would have been dead. But he didn't have a gun. But what killed George? Cigarettes, goddammit. So that's my sponsorship. All right, so let's get into these albums here. The early format is going to be like the back half of the albums. The back half, I'm going to be doing a little bit more sort of holistic approaches, whereas the early albums, I'm going to be talking about spotlights, sort of the greatest hits, the songs you might already know, the hidden lights, the less known songs, and then the lowlights, the songs which I think are frankly L's, okay? Each of these early albums often will have what I call a harmony highlight, just some moment where you hear them singing together and it feels as though you're touching God's face. And for each album, I'm going to try to give you what I'll call a Beatles banger, okay? To just try to, if you need to just get one song, that's what it is. So let's start with Please Please Me from 1963, which surprised me. I did not think I was going to rate this high because it's only 8 out of 14 originals, but that's going to go into slaps, no cap. Okay, absolute insanity of what is sometimes what they were called on the cover of one of the anthology albums, The Savage Young Beatles. This is youth and this is craft. Do you understand? This band worked like lunatics. They did 10,000 hours of playing together before they were like 15 years old. I'm exaggerating. That's basically what it was. They would just hustle. They had the most grind set before the term existed, working in Germany, working in their Liverpool, in their home there, buzzed off their ass on uppers, just working so hard to create this perfect band, this perfect rock and roll band. And this whole album, this whole early album has that feel, just this complete and total explosion. You know, the Spotlights, I Saw Her Standing There, that's a song that everybody knows. But it just actually rocks so hard, even though it has those woo and all the little cheesy things like that. And then I think, you know, the Beatles banger off this album is Please Please Me. It's the title track, but it's just so tight and great harmonies. And let's not forget the fascinating sexual connotation of the lyrics, please please me like I please you. You also probably know Love Me Do, which I think is the weakest of the best known songs off this album. The harmonica is just a little bit too strong, although I do think it pairs nicely with the Manchester song Hand in Glove by the Smiths. A little over harmonica there. Maybe some unexpected songs you might want to check out if you don't know, like Misery. The way it's sung, I mean, the second song they have is about being in misery. They're not all just rainbows and unicorns in this first album. Chains is a song, it's a cover that I just love for some reason. I think it's one of my favorite melodies, and that's the first George lead. And we get to the song Anna, Go With Him, which is the first of what I call a Beatles cuck classic. It's all about like just go with him. Just there's all these Beatles songs about like just letting other people like be with the women that you want to be. I mean, an example that's on none of these albums because it was a single is She Loves You. Great song. I sing it to my daughter all the time. I learned how to play it on guitar. The whole song is like she loves you. Like he's such a cuck. He's just sitting there and he's singing about how this woman like loves this other guy. Anyways, go with him. Al Bundy. Do you want to know a secret? Has George's strongest singing. And this is the thing about the Beatles. Even though this early phase is not as interesting for us in this current age that we're in, they wrote songs for teenage girls better than any committee would ever be able to do. You know, that's what people do now. They try to figure out how to write perfect songs. You know, the great, what's that guy's name? Bo Burnham, right? Bill Burnham. It's a combination between Bo Burnham and Bill Burr. That's my new favorite comedian is Bill Burnham. Can AI create Bill Burnham? Bo Burnham has a whole song about the way that people write to teenage girls, but nobody could do it as well as the Beatles could because the Beatles were doing it authentically. A low light is definitely the song Boys. I love Ringo, but this song is just weird. It could be seen as a sort of hidden queer classic. Someday I'm going to do a video about Jailhouse Rock, the Elvis Presley song. Number 47 said to number 3, you're the cutest jailbird I ever did see. I sure would be delighted with your company. Come on and do the Jailhouse Rock with me. This is one prisoner saying to another prisoner that they would like to bang. And, you know, there's no co-ed prisons. Anyways, so in this song, Boys by Ringo, or sung by Ringo, my girl says when I kiss her lips, gets a thrill through her fingertips. And then the chorus is inexplicably, don't you know I mean boys? So he means he's kissing boys? I don't know. I have a complicated relationship with Paul, as is going to become clear. People think I hate Paul. He's my favorite Beatle. But people think I hate Paul because I have a complicated relationship with him. The song P.S. I Love You is the cheesy genius of Paul, which we are going to see over and over and over again. And people hate it when you call it cheesy, but you got to call a cheese a cheese. It's cheesy, but it's also genius. Little tiny notes like the piano notes on Misery, the drums on Anna, so many highlights. Ask Me Why has Paul coming back in and coming back to the question of misery and the strength of his voice. And then we get to a song like Twist and Shout, which if you're my age, you watch the movie Ferris Bueller too many times and it's kind of ruined. And the thing is this, a lot of these covers I don't like because they're just, frankly, pale white imitations of great black rock songs. But John's voice, that metallic, blood-tasting, piercing strength, is not an imitation of anything. It's just his voice. And no matter how cynical you want to be, you cannot beat the savage young Beatles, you know? The harmony highlight is on the song Misery. Just listen to the way they sing that. Next up is their second album with the Beatles. And low key, this ain't it. Oh, there's some mad Beatles fans. I don't blame you. I listened to this album this morning. This album rules. But we have to be fair. We have to say there has to be a distinction. If everything's the best, then no one's the best. This is what Frozone said, right? Who said that in The Incredibles? Mystery Man? What was his name? If everyone is superpowered, then no one's superpowered, something like that. So now we got 9 out of 14 originals, one more original, but to me, that's the main fall of their original, of their first couple albums, is this emphasis on covers. This is their worst album. I think this is their worst album that contains a lot of amazing songs. Like the opening track, It Won't Be Long. Listen to the drums on this song, how hard Ringo Starr goes on the crash cymbal. Nobody, watch a concert video of Ringo playing the crash cymbal because he had to, because he won't be able to hear anything because everyone was screaming so loud. Listen to the lead guitar lines on It Won't Be Long that goes right into the song All I've Got to Do, which has perhaps my favorite Beatles sound on any Beatles song is the hi-hat sound. Oh my God, it's so good. This is one of my favorite sounds on their worst album. The Beatles banger has to be It Won't Be Long, just for the crazy drums. You probably also know the song All My Lovin'. It's nice. It's a good shuffle. It's fun. It's what I really enjoy about this album is hearing a song like Don't Bother Me, which is the origins of George. George, like I said, is a contestable genius. I mean, if you listen to his first solo album, it seems pretty incontestable. The guy's amazing. But he also did I Got My Mind Set on You. So what are you going to do? You get to see him because he was a lot younger than them, you know. So he was like, 20 or 21 when he wrote this song, and he's just beginning his career as a songwriter. And by the end of their career, he's going to be just as good as John and Paul. But right here, you can follow his growth. Low Lights, definitely Little Child, way too many songs about like loving you, little girl. Yeah. Money. If I never hear Money again, Money is the worst Beatles song. Okay? Including all of Yoko Ono's solo work. Okay? Roll Over Beethoven, I could also do without it. There's a special pair of covers, though, on here. Please, Mr. Postman, Until There Was You. And this is where we're really getting to how the Beatles are such a joy and why my homework for you is to understand the difference in their voices. Because when you start to see the difference in these two singer-songwriters, their mentality and the way that they do things, the difference between John and Paul is so amazing to study and enjoy. And when they come together, when they come together, there is nothing like it. And when you have songs that go back to back, when you compare them like these things where Till There Was You is such a Paul song, that soft honey cloth, and Please Mr. Postman, just the tone on John's voice, we're really getting to that excitement that I'm talking about, the joy that comes with studying these people who somehow managed to be in the same place at the same time, being together. You Really Got a Hold on Me is a wonderful song, and the Beatles did nothing to improve this song. Smokey Robinson, The Miracles, just listen to the original, okay? I'm sorry to say, they did nothing. Devil in Our Hearts, kind of a forgettable George song, not a second time. It's like also a filler. There's just too much filler on this album. Hard Day's Night, the first entirely original album. And again, I just re-listened to this and it's great, but it's sus, TBH, according to the rest of the Beatles' work. Okay, now it's all originals, which is great. And frankly, the first note of the entire album is up there with my favorite Beatles moments. Just the opening chord, that famous, bizarre opening chord that people can't even decide what that chord is, that scream, that just, it's not fair. It's not fair. You know, it's not fair that they wrote that. It's not fair that that exists. Like, that's how good that single note is. Everything that the song is going to say, everything they were trying to communicate about the insanity of their life, everything that's in the movie that's there, every single thing where you could write a 300, 400-page book about the Beatles in the 60s and what their experience was like and what they were going through, where they couldn't go anywhere and they spent 100% of their time with each other in a single hotel room. Okay, they weren't with the girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever. They were. I don't think he even had boyfriends. I just said that by mistake. Maybe some questions about early Beatles. You can do some fanfic on that. But like, all of that, the entire insanity of their life is contained in a single note played on a guitar. Anyways, kind of sus. TBH. You probably also know Can't Buy Me Love, which again, there's just a savageness to it, which I love. Special attention to the guitar solo, and it's making up for the fact that Money is a stupid song. Okay? Like, think about that, right? They went from I don't care about anything but money to Can't Buy Me Love. A lot of great hidden lights, like there's this like melody of the chorus to the song I Should Have Known Better, which is beautiful. And I Love You is a beautiful Paul song. Things We Said Today, the harmonies on this song, the brilliance of Paul. I would say that the Beatles banger is the song You Can't Do That. There's going to be a whole series of songs of John Lennon being a son of a bitch towards women. He is also the best writer about being a son of a bitch to women. So the good thing about John is that he, throughout his life, sort of put forth a very misogynist, controlling personality, but then also addressed the source of that, which was an unstable connection to his mother, explained his problems with his mother, and then healed as a human being and stopped abusing the women in his life. But anyways, total banger. You can't do that. A Low Light is a song like I'm Just Happy to Dance with You. This weird bumping sound. And When I Get Home, just the lyrics, I'm going to love her till the cows come home. Dude, come on. Come on, Beatles. Bad lyrics. Bad lyrics. Beautiful harmony, the way Couldn't Stand the Pain on the song If I Fell. They even sang it better than I did. Beatles for Sale, 1964. Do you understand that all that music I'm talking about, we're still talking about the first 2 years? Only 6 of the 13 are originals. It's way too heavy on John's songs. Now, the thing about this song, is this album, is that it's famous because they look like little Moody Boys on the front. This is the beginning of Moody Boys Beatles, you know? They aren't super happy with what's going on. Now, it's not their worst album, but low-key, this ain't it by the standards of the Beatles. Now, if you are a John fan, this album is fascinating. You know, the opening double hit. The song I'm a Loser is sort of seen as the breaking point of the Beatles, where they allegedly were now influenced by Bob Dylan, so everything sounded different in their music, which makes sense. But some of the lyrics are just so good. You know, is it for her or me that I cry? He's understanding that a lot of the way that we talk about love is actually selfish. I am not what I appear to be. But just take like these 2 songs that are super well known. You know, I'm a Loser and I'll Follow the Sun. This is what I'm talking about. This is that Paul John 1-2. Okay, the give and go, the 2-man weave. I'll Follow the Sun is just the most honeyish Paul sweet song, even though it's a pretty badass I'm Gonna Leave You song, but still just these things together. And this is D tier Beatles right here. Low key, this ain't it, Chief. You know, 8 Days a Week is a beautiful song, especially if you listen to just the way it leads into this, like, frankly chilling chorus. The song No Reply is another great anti-girlfriend John song. Just great dynamism. I Don't Want to Spoil the Party is a song I didn't know that well. So I didn't listen to anything before Revolver when I was growing up. So in high school, I only listened to late Beatles. I was an insufferable idiot. Okay. But I Don't Want to Spoil the Party is great because it fits into one of my favorite categories of songs, which are antisocial songs. This could go right along with another Smith song, How Soon Is Now. You know, like, I've had a couple drinks, who cares? Babies in Black is a beautiful waltz. Again, another kind of cuck song. He's talking about how she's dancing with somebody else, but there's just so many lowlights. Rock and roll music. Again, John's voice is so great, but nothing that he didn't do on Twist and Shout. It feels like a pale retread of Twist and Shout. Mr. Moonlight, I could do without it. Kansas City, I don't need Paul doing Elvis. Every Little Thing is just filler. There's an interesting thing where there's George and Ringo this time are sort of, they're doing covers of Carl Perkins. Carl Perkins was most famously covered by Elvis Presley on the song Blue Suede Shoes, very influential in the whole skiffle scene and the early rock scene. So it's cool because, Ringo's singing Honey Don't and George is singing Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. They're both great songs. Realistically, they're not adding that much to them, but I like it because it's as though they're having a conversation with Elvis through the intermediary of Carl Perkins, because they can't just have a conversation with Elvis because Elvis is still too big. Much like the Smokey Robinson cover from the previous album, The Words of Love is a great cover of a great song, but it does nothing. It does nothing. Just listen to Buddy Holly. Harmony highlight, one of my favorite moments in all the Beatles catalog is just the way and you gave me no reply. Such a memorable moment. Now we're going to get to Help, the soundtrack album to their second movie in 2 years, which I'm going to be putting that in the B tier. So it's interesting because, it has a lot of songs that you know really well. What I like is that Help and Hard Day's Night go so well together because essentially Help is like the song Help and is a spiritual sequel to the song Hard Day's Night. Like they're still in the situation where their fame has put them in a situation where their life is unlivable. So it has this great screaming quality, much like Hard Day's Night. It's like the Beatles are breaking out and they're saying, help us. Of course, there's the song Yesterday, which you definitely know. We'll talk about that later. I would say one of the spotlights is also the Beatles banger of the song Help, of the album Help, which is Ticket to Ride. The way the drums are stilted and so far behind everything, it's so catchy, jangly, and moving, and all these changing rhythms. So many hidden lights on this album. The night before, Paul is just rocking and great. I Need You, George is playing with the gain on his guitar. Wah, wah. And there's another girl with You're Going to Lose That Girl. It's this kind of like a little dyad here where Paul tries on the jealous guy angle, like I've got another girl and she loved me to the end. And then John does You're Going to Lose That Girl, which again, so I like to imagine that She Loves You is a song about a guy who dates a girl that John wanted to date. And then You're Going to Lose That Girl is later on when that guy who actually was cruel, she was wrong, he was cruel, when they actually break up. The song It's Only Love has, I guess, their first real super strong drug reference when he says I get high. I always thought he said I get high and I want to hold your hand, but turns out he says I want to hold your I can't hide. A low light on this album, I'm going to annoy some people, is You Gotta Hide Your Love Away. It to me, it's the percussion is too intrusive and it's just a bad Dylan impression. It's a great scene from the movie. You Like Me Too Much. It's just too simply like I would never, if someone would say, hey, how do I get into the Beatles? I would never, ever say, listen to something like You Like Me Too Much. Like that's just too much cookie cutter pop trash. Maybe not trash. I'm sorry, George. Act Naturally, a great Ringo song. I always thought this was a Carl Perkins song. It's not. Tell Me What You See has the harmony of this album. What you see is me. They just, so much of this early stuff, that's the whole thing. Like, even though later, when they get more experimental, their music gets better and more interesting, especially for a modern audience. God, the way that they are together in these early days, the way you feel it, that they are one person. They are one person with 8 legs, The album ends with Dizzy Miss Lizzy, which is like the last gasp of bad covers on Beatles songs. This is like, we've got to just throw one more stinker out there. We did it. Also, when we're talking about Paul, this album obviously has I've Just Seen a Face. which is arguably Paul's best song. I don't know how many Paul songs are Paul's best song. For a Paul hater, I sure love Paul. People called me a Paul hater, even though I am on record and made a video about the fact that Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time is the best Christmas song of all time, and I stand by that. But I've just seen a face, and then Yesterday. And the thing about Yesterday is this. You've heard it too many times, but have you ever listened to it? I heard this song a million times before I listened to it. Actually, my daughter told me that she liked it, so I got a guitar and I tried to learn how to sing it and play it. It's so beautiful. It's just, what are you supposed to do? This asshole was 23 years old when he wrote I've Just Seen a Face and Yesterday. Do you understand how cruel that is? That is Mozart level of insanity. We then get to the biggest shock of this whole list, Rubber Soul. Okay? Rubber Soul, I was positive this was going to be S tier. I was positive this was going to be one of my absolute favorites. But I got news for me. It's not. It's not as perfect as I remember. It's just not. I listened to it again and using these super highest standards. We're now moving into where I'm not going to talk about hidden lights and low lights and highlights. I'm going to be talking about the albums in the whole. Okay, we're in the good stuff. We're in the segment where there's no more Dizzy Miss Lizzy. Okay, there's no more money. It's just not top Beatles. I thought it was. If I was watching this video before I made this video, I would argue with me. But just Drive My Car is a great song, maybe a little too poppy. Norwegian Wood, the sitar is kind of a half measure. It's just not as good as I remember. You Won't See Me is perfect. An absolute perfect pop song that shows their new ambition. Nowhere Man has those crazy melodies, a beautiful, I can't divide it from the movie Yellow Submarine, but still. Think for Yourself, George is getting close to reaching mature George, but he's still not quite there. And then a song like The Word is filler. It's filler. I'm sorry, it's filler. It's a good song. I could sing you every single word to it right now, but it's filler. I like that it's all about love. Love's great. What Goes On is a near perfect Ringo song. No complaints with that. Girl is the song that makes me go, am I crazy? Am I crazy? It's gotta be. It's not just lit. It's W. But no, I gotta keep it there. Even though Girl, if you've never heard Girl, you have to listen to Girl. The pain and pleasure. He sings about pain and pleasure. And the song elicits pain and pleasure. He's breathing and he's pained, and the sounds. I'm Looking Through You. Another perfect song. Just this album is so unbelievably good. When I say it's not S tier, I'm saying of the Beatles' work. And then we get to In My Life. God, and I can't. But In My Life, the thing that's great is I feel like these guys had these little conversations, right? I feel like they're competitive with each other and they love each other. Okay, John and Paul. And what I think is happening is that John is like, okay, Yesterday is great, but what if I did a nostalgia song? What if I talked about the past? What if I did this kind of wistful thing? And I think John wins. I think In My Life is a better song. It's a more moving song. Wait is fine, but it's the songwriting level. Like, basically, we're at the point where they're splitting, and it's like Help and Revolver on either side, and Rubber Soul is right in the middle. And sometimes they just kind of go to that help side. This is on that help side. If I Needed Someone has a beautiful harmony in it. And then the album ends with Run for Your Life, which is an unforgivable song just to listen to. It's a great riff, but it feels like filler. And he's literally saying, like, he isn't just saying like, I am going to kill you if you cheat on me. He's like, take this as a sermon. I'm going to stamp your life. Basically, it's like this. I'm not kidding around. I'm going to stomp on you until you stop breathing. That's basically what he's doing. It can't be S tier. It just can't. And of course, we had their best album, Revolver. So I'm not even going to spend that much time. I did like a 2-hour video podcast with, I've been meaning to listen to that. Andrew Ambrose Lee over there. This is it. You know, they're still living together basically on tour, but then they're also having breaks and going off and learning about different things. They're testing the edges. This is the perfect mixture of savage young Beatles and avant-garde Beatles. It's all there. It's not all perfect, okay? I'm not saying this is everything's perfect. I don't think the cover is perfect. I think the title is a bummer because John Lennon was shot, so I don't like thinking about guns when I think about the Beatles. A couple of the songs are not great. Dr. Robert, shut up about your stupid drug dealers. Ugh, it's just not that good of a song. Taxman is the opener, which is interesting. It's funny. I call it the worst song on the best album. It's understandable and it totally rocks. If you don't speak English, I bet this is one of your favorite songs. But it's fascinating because he's so bitter about having to pay taxes, because he did. He had to pay ridiculous taxes. And the thing is that the dichotomy of George that I was talking about is finally fully on display, because he has 3 songs on this album, but 2 of them are Love You Too, where he's like, you know, we are not, he's basically Yoda, you know, like, we are not this crude matter. We are just beings of light and love. Why am I talking like Jordan Peterson? Makes me want to cry. You know, like he's this like ethereal person who's searching for the beyond, while at the same time he's like, I'm so sick of paying taxes. But anyways, the rest of the album is literally blinding perfection. Paul McCartney is at his absolute best. Every single note, every single song that he wrote. Eleanor Rigby, he brings social realism into pop music. I didn't even know that there was no drums or guitar on this song when I was growing up. This was one of my favorite songs. I never even realized that it was all acoustic. It was all whatever classical instrumentation, because it doesn't matter. It's just a song that hits you so hard and is so beautiful. Paul's here, there, and everywhere. Some of his best pop instincts. Good Day Sunshine. They have a lot of songs about the sun and about waking up. I think this is the best. For No One, name me a better breakup song than For No One. There's not a better one. I say this a lot. There might be one as good, but there's no better song than For No One. You can't listen to that song when you're going through a breakup. You'll cry. Got to Get You Into My Life. Right. Give me Another Dare. Find me another song that's about the excitement of like having a crush, that has that feeling of excitement and joy. I was alone. Just that joy and excitement and lust. It's all there. Now, it's sort of also like the thing about late Beatles is Paul really kind of takes over. So what's fascinating is John is a lot less present on this album, but he's so good as well. I'm Only Sleeping. Hey, kids, you don't like working, right? You're just waiting for universal basic income. So is John Lennon. This is a great anti-work song. This is a great anti-capitalist song. This is about the importance. Okay, it was actually about that he smoked too much weed and he didn't want to wake up. But also, it is an anti-capitalist screed about how it's important to live life and not have to run around all the time and just work to make money. She Said is straight up the best song that was ever written in the 1990s, even though it was written in 1966. It is the best of alternative rock and roll in a classic rock song. And then Tomorrow Never Knows, it's just, to even begin to explain how awesome the drums are in Tomorrow Never Knows, how awesome the production is, everything backwards, how he's using these hippy dippy Dawn of the Dead or whatever Book of the Dead lyrics. It's just everything comes together so perfectly. And then probably the most slept on Beatles song is And Your Bird Can Sing, which I think has the best harmonies between Paul and George in the second half of their album, of their catalog. I think it's just a beautiful song. And of course, Ringo gets his moment to shine with Yellow Submarine, which is, of course, the best Beatles song. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Yeah, I did that. It's the album I listened to the most growing up. And I'm trying to think about it in a fair way in comparison to the rest of their work. It gets a lot of credit for being this cohesive concept album, but it's not. It's, I think, the only dated Beatles album. Like, too much of its time. Now, listen, the Rolling Stones did an album. They tried to imitate it, Satanic Majesty's Request or whatever. That's 1,000 times more dated, right? I'm not saying that it's but it's a little too hippie, a little too druggy. It just feels too much of its time. Also, this is really the Paul era where he's calling the shots, and he isn't really reaching the levels that he will reach later. There's only 4 John songs, only 1 George song. Now listen, this has A Day in the Life, which I've already said is a banger. It's one of 2 Beatles songs that I listen to and cry every time I listen to it. Not because of anything that they say, but because it makes me weep to think that human beings can create something so beautiful. Okay? That is how good it is. These elliptical lyrics, these unclear lyrics. I was reading somewhere online, Tim Riley called them the supernatural calm. It's right there. It's like about the inability to read the news. It's about the inability to confront life. It's like the inability to live. Like you can't even speak. You can't even say things, and you're so haunted. And then the middle of this just John fest, Paul pops up and talks about going to work on the bus, and it all snaps into focus, and you understand that like the only way to get through life is just to like live life. But like you can't live life because you just read the news today. Oh boy. How many times have you read the news and said, I read the news today? Oh boy. All the things that are implied in oh boy. The same way that John was able to make 1 chord, bang, mean 4 years of their life. Oh boy encompasses the entire modern condition of seeing all these things in the world that you can't change, that you feel cursed for knowing about, that you feel impotent to help. And you're just there reading the news and saying, oh boy. Me dear. So this song is definitely S tier, okay? It's their best song for a reason, and it's on this album, and it's wonderful. Not the last track. The last track is the little bit that they used for when the album skipped at the end. Whack. Played forward, said, we will fuck you like Superman. It's true. So you know that song. You probably know the Sgt. Pepper song, which is fine. I don't think it rocks as hard as it wants to. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, it's a great song, but again, I'm just not super into the drug stuff. I think he does better druggy psychedelic lyrics later. Getting better, what I like about this is that we have a Paul song where it's the bass that's really cranked up. It's not just his composing. I used to be cruel to my women. I used to be cruel to my woman. I beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved. This is that thing where John's understanding that it's not good to beat women and control them. But the thing that I love it is this. You focus on I beat her, but do you know what's just as bad? Is keeping her apart from the things that she loved. He's admitting to emotional abuse, which gets very little attention. So John is admitting to something very terrible that you should never do. But we live in a society that looks at emotional manipulation and abuse and says, that's fine. Parents can emotionally abuse their kids all they want. That's fine. Is there a bruise? No. That's fine. That's fine. It's not fine. And John, God bless him, God bless that abusive maniac, he at least had the wherewithal to understand the nature of abuse. B tier. I promise you, I'm not doing this for clicks or whatever. This is how I'm processing it. Mr. Kite. What I like about being for the benefit of Mr. Kite is that it feels like John is like reluctantly playing along with Paul's stupid idea, being the Sgt. Pepper's thing, which is not stupid, but you know what I mean? Kind of like, fine, I'll do a song that fits in with this, and then he just writes like one of the best songs on the album. He just beats the whole concept. Good Morning, another one of the great morning songs. I don't really like Paul's solo. I do like the pet sounds at the end. She's Leaving Home, though. Just who wants to listen? Just truly, I'm not saying it's a bad song, but do you actually want to listen to She's Leaving Home and Lovely Rita Mina Maid? I'm not saying they're bad songs, but do you want to listen to them? Do you ever hear She's Leaving Home and go, yes, sweet? I don't. It's all about like, and plus two in the context, this is what I'm talking about, too dated, because it's all about like parents don't understand their kids and they're leaving home and they're probably going to hate Ashbury. Have you ever heard George Harrison talk about going to hate Ashbury? It's awesome. He seriously went there and he disco stewed his way out of hate Ashbury. Like he walked like, not today, disco lady. He just like went in and everyone was just all strung out and he just left. Slouching Towards Bethlehem. Never read Joan Didion, her description of Haight-Ashbury in '67. It's very good. Little help from my friends. I don't like it. Maybe it's just I've always found that I get high. I don't like it when people throw in drug lyrics to make people clap for those drug lyrics. That's how it feels. It's just too dated. Also, I mean, Joe Cocker's version was on the Wonder Years, which is I just heard that version so many times. Fixing a Hole is fine. I like the confusing lyrics of it. But then there's really great stuff. Like When I'm 64. Like When I'm 64 is great. Paul has this whole oldie-timey style that he's getting into, and I love it. I love his oldie-timey, his like Paul's jukebox. He's trying to go through a lot of different old styles. Especially, I love this idea of singing about being old when you're the pillar of youth culture. And he's really thinking about what it means to be old and to have a connection. Man, Lovely Rita. Is it a fetish song? It feels like a fetish song to me. Looking like a military man, and then Paul and John do orgasm sounds together. Which then leads to their next album, Magical Mystery Tour. Yep. Hey, I'm surprised too. Did I just say Magical Mystery Tour is better than Rubber Soul and Sgt. Pepper's? I did. Let me tell you why. I like it. I meant to say more than that. But I like it, so I have to turn off my phone. I usually record with my phone. A little beep there. It's a cross between an album and a mix of singles. Now, when I listened to it, I didn't have that experience. So when I grew up, I didn't understand how Beatles albums were released. I just bought the CDs. I bought them on those weird long boxes. I bought the CDs and listened to them. So I didn't know that the second half of the album was a collection of singles and that the first half wasn't. I didn't see the movie because it wasn't at my local video store. And so what that did is allowed me to experience this album as though it was just an album. And what's fascinating is the opening half. And this, hey, boomers, stick with me because I'm talking to the Zoomers now. It's a vibe. My wife, I told her that I put Magical Mystery Tour in S tier, and she's like, "It's too wimpy," and it's true, it is. But it's a vibe. The first half of this album is a vibe. Now, it starts off with Magical Mystery Tour, which is a better rocker than Sgt. Pepper's, okay? I just think it is. It's got a similar beat, but the way that it rocks, I think it rocks harder. And I love the idea of a Magical Mystery Tour because when my mom used to not know what to do, and she sometimes would say, we're going on a Magical Mystery Tour. Now, usually we'd end up like just going to like Dittos and like as a department store, like buying socks or whatever, but that's what she used to say. But it starts us off and it like rocks hard, but it's a little bit weird. And then we get the Fool on the Hill, which is a song that I've kind of loved and hated over my life. But it's Paul not even being a lover, but being an outsider, talking about an outsider. And you sort of feel with him, there's this kind of flute, and you sort of start kind of vibing away. And then the only instrumental that I'm going to be talking about in their primary canon is the song Flying, which is like psychedelic Booker T and the MGs. I don't really know how to say it except to say that I've always loved this song. It is such a beautiful song, and you're just flying and you're going along, and you start off rocking and then you're going on the flutes, and then Blue Jay Way, another petulant George song where he's complaining about waiting. He has so many songs about not wanting to wait. That dude was, as I call him, the selfish conscience of the Beatles. He was very principled and very selfish, and he just doesn't want to wait. But it has this whole, there's a fog upon LA. It just has this whole vibe to it. It's almost shoegazy weird, this whole first half of the album. And then Paul comes, tags it with Your Mother Should Know, which I really enjoy. It's one of Paul's jukebox songs, his old style song. I love it. And then leads in to maybe my favorite John song, I'm the Walrus. This is not only my favorite psychedelic song, my favorite psychedelic Beatles song. I think this is the best surrealist poem. And I've read André Breton in French, okay? I know about surrealist poems. The way that he plays with language and puts these things together, and I don't care how he did it. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me how you come to these things, because not anyone can come to these things. Just coming up with words like semolina pilchard. I don't know what any of that means. Yellow matter custard. Like, he has this way of forming these words, and the release of the chorus and the bizarreness of I am the Eggman, like the way he doesn't conjugate all the way through. And then what is an Eggman and what is Cuckoo Cachoo? It's just an amazing opening where it has that ethereal quality, and then your mother should know, and then just the biggest freak out with orchestras and backwards everything. And then the back half. Why'd I put this S tier? Because the back half is a shut up singles comp. Okay? Hello, goodbye, great late Paul cheesiness, but it has a joy to it, especially the ending. Na 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 na. They just start tagging, they're just bragging. And then what I believe to be the greatest 1-2 punch in the entire Beatles catalog, why it has to be S tier, is because Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. How can these two people have written these two songs that are both essentially the same topic? What was it like growing up lower middle class or working class in Northern England in the 40s and 50s? Okay, what was that about? How do we phrase it? John comes out with Strawberry Fields Forever, which every single time I hear that song, I've heard it 1,000 times. Every time I hear it, I do not understand how something so amazing was made so long ago, how somebody made that music. A lot of it's because of George Martin's production, but the sounds, the bizarreness. And the funny thing is, my son really related to the song, and he made this piece of pottery. And I think it perfectly illustrates the song. And what's crazy is, obviously there's strawberries and there's fields, that makes sense. But what he said, what he was trying to illustrate was nobody, I think, is in my tree. The loneliness. My son was explaining a feeling of loneliness through this song. No one, I think, is in my tree? What the hell does that mean? I don't understand it. But this admirable piece of pottery, this understands it. I get it. It's a vibe. No one, I think, is in my tree. And then following it up with Penny Lane, which is just pure Paulness and bright, but there's little dark minor notes all the way throughout it, and it keeps you bouncing, and you're in Liverpool. You're in Liverpool with them. You are experiencing it with them, but nothing is simple. Nothing is straightforward. S tier, okay? And then it ends with nearly ends with Baby You're a Rich Man, which is a fun anthem, and I just enjoy it. What it does end with is All You Need Is Love, which is the best of the hippie anthems, okay? It's, I have a complicated relationship with boomers and with hippies, but All You Need Is Love is the simplest expression of it. It is the truest, most straightforward thing that you can the way of saying it. And the way that's integrated, She Loves You, Yeah, 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 sung in the back at the end, ties it all together and makes this such an amazing album. The White Album is impossible to talk about quickly. Now, the thing is, the White Album is S tier meets D tier. So what do you do with S tier meets D tier? Well, you put it at the head of B tier. This has the most S tier songs on any album, okay? It has, by my calculation, 11 perfect songs. Bungalow Bill, the banger, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, featuring the only good thing Eric Clapton ever did, the guitar solo. Okay? If you've never heard While My Guitar Gently Weeps, that's my Beatle banger. You have to listen to that song. You have to get to know it. You have to get to love it. The languid quality of it. Happiness is a Warm Gun. They just keep getting further and further out there. The song that you think's about a gun, but might be about heroin. I'm so tired of follow-up to I'm Only Sleeping. What happens when you fail in society? What happens when you have to keep working? Just John, his most bitter, angry self. Blackbird, a little bit preachy, but still a gorgeous song. And Rocky Raccoon, all of a sudden we now have like all these animals all over the place. They're going to be joined by an octopus soon enough. Helter Skelter, which I've already talked about, obviously inspired the Mansons, but who really cares? Because it's this insanely hard song that just makes you feel like you're listening to a totally different band. Everybody's got something to hide, but Me and My Monkey, one of my favorite songs growing up, again, it might be about heroin, might not be, but has all of this frantic energy. Cry Baby Cry, a softer song that makes you feel so close. And then Dear Prudence, a moving song about trying to pressure someone to join a cult. That's the real Manson song, by the way, is Dear Prudence, not Helter Skelter. Because it's like, come on, just join us. Yeah, fuck the sun. But it also has the most lowlights, the most D tier songs, okay? Back in the USSR, I'd rather just listen to the Beach Boys. Glass Onion, it's too self-referential. I don't like it. Obladi Oblada, everyone said it, but it's not a fun listen. I Will is a snooze. Julia is an interesting song, but it's too sad because it's about how his mother abandoned him and how he abandoned his own son, essentially. Birthday, I don't like it. I've heard it too many times. It's just not that interesting of a song to me. I prefer John Lennon's other song about birthdays, Nobody Loves You, when he says, nobody loves you when you're upside down. Everybody's hollering about their own birthday. Everybody loves you when you're 6 foot in the ground. That's how I prefer that. Long, long, long is boring, boring, boring. And Good Night is too sad because he doesn't know how to talk to his own son. In the middle of all that, you have all these great songs, which are mid songs, right? To use your terminology. Wild Honey Pie is a cool freak out. Martha, My Dear is a very enjoyable old timey song, but it's not quite Your Mother Should Know. Don't Pass Me By is now that's okay. That's a banger right there. Ringo, you get your moment. It's the point where you realize that Ringo was always the country music star hiding in the Beatles. Why Don't We Do It in the Road? It's a simple, straightforward song, kind of a companion piece to Helter Skelter, where Paul is showing that he's not all soft. Piggies is a fine political song by George. Your Blues would be boring, but it's just saved by John Lennon's insane voice and the production choices. Mother Nature's Son is On the Line. Sexy Sadie is where he's finally mad at the cult leader. Do you see how long this album is? This is like a Drake album. There's too many songs. Revolutions 1 and 9 are both great for different reasons. I highly recommend listening to Revolution number 9 on your headphones when you're alone at night. Honey Pie, another old style song, but maybe not necessary. Savoy Truffle, George Harrison loved Candy. And then finally, Good Night is right there. Just okay. So that's why you're right there. The White Album slaps. That was my favorite Beatles album for most of my life. That and Yellow and Sgt. Pepper's, but you see they're right there in the middle. What about the Yellow Submarine soundtrack? Well, I got to put it down there, but it's only because it just doesn't have enough new Beatles songs. All 4 songs are bangers, though. Hey Bulldog is the song that you will get to play on the piano for the rest of your life. The essential John lyric, the coming of great John lyrics, what makes you think you're something special when you smile? All Together Now is the spiritual signal sequel to the song Yellow Submarine. And then both George songs are awesome. Only a Northern Song, I've already told you, is like a great avant-garde rocker. And then It's All Too Much is the other Beatles song that gets me to cry. It regularly makes me cry because when I'm happy, when I'm with my family, I think that it's all too much for me to take the love that's shining all around me. Like I feel that. And it makes me want to cry because he's expressing how I feel when I'm joyful. Now, there's a couple of tracks we've already talked about, Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love, which are fine to have again. And then George Martin's bit. I've done an entire video about this album, about why it's the most underrated Beatles album. But realistically, we have to be brutal. We have to be brutal. And it's just not up to snuff with the rest of them. We only got a couple left here. Abbey Road, I have a complex relationship with Abbey Road. I never understood that it was their last album because I just thought that Let It Be was their last album. I didn't understand that they recorded Let It Be before Abbey Road, but they released it after. I didn't understand that till later. And this was what shocked me. I didn't expect this. I thought this was A tier just all along, just always going to be A tier, but it's not. It's my second favorite Beatles album. It's only got one real weak point, which is Oh Darling, and that's because it's too Paul. But the weakness and the greatness of the album is that it's all too Paul. To me, it's not Sgt. Pepper or Magical Mystery Tour, which is often how they're compared. I think it's Abbey Road or Sgt. Pepper. Because this to me feels like this feels like the vision that Paul had of having some kind of oddly cohesive album comes through here. And goddamn, is he a weird guy. He fought the band so hard to keep the song Maxwell's Silver Hammer on this album. It's like, I think we need to have a song about a guy who kills people with a hammer. Yeah, I don't know, Paul. I don't want that song. No, we really need to do it. Yeah, I really don't. Mal, grab a hammer. We're going to start doing the hammer song now. Please, Hammer, don't hurt him. Hey, is that what the title is about? Please, Hammer, don't hurt him. Shout out to Scott Ackerman. He made that joke first. But John isn't a ton on here, but when he's here, he's super cool. Like the song "Come Together," which, if you don't know, the groove is so well known for its guitar line and its bass line. It's actually the drum line that makes "Come Together." If you want to be a good drummer, learn how to play "Come Together" first, and then move on. I Want You, that's just a total banger. I just love that song. The way that it feels, it has this twisting, epic quality to it. And we finally have the apotheosis of George. We started with Don't Bother Me all those albums ago, and we have Something, and Here Comes the Sun, the best 1-2 punch. Here Comes the Sun's kind of like Yesterday. You've heard it too many times, but it is unavoidable. It is such a beautifully written, perfectly made song. And Something is a perfect, smoky, weird love song. It's a smoky, gauzy, weird love song. Think about where they came. Think about how far they've come. And I've done an entire video about Octopus's Garden, one of my favorite songs. And you should watch that video. This is the promise of Sgt. Pepper's realized. Side A, much like Magical Mystery Tour, is basically individual singles. And then side B is this medley, which ends with the perfect ending. The Beatles ended their career with the most important words they could possibly leave us. Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, and someday I'm going to make her mine. I got a tattoo actually on my back. I'll show it to you later. But it just means so much to me that with their last breath, the Beatles got together and wrote a 30-second song about wanting to bang the Queen. Just to me, obviously I'm being facetious. It ends with the song The End, which is stupid. And I'm sorry. In the end, the love you make is equal to the love you take. It doesn't make any sense. It's not. That is fake deep. It's fake deep. It is fake deep. It's a great song, but that's fake deep. I'm sorry about your tattoo. It was a bad tattoo choice. You should have got Her Majesty tattooed instead. But still, everything goes together so beautifully here, this whole back half. It's just beautiful drum solo, guitar solo, movement. It's weird. It's always weird, but it has such a great feeling. Yeah, I Want You is great because it's an 8-minute song, but then like Kanye style, it's like no fade out, just cuts off, which was the last thing the Beatles did when they were in a studio together, was stop it like that. And then we get to Let It Be, which I was shocked. I'm putting it up here with a caveat. It's A tier if you cut and paste. So there's two main versions of it. The original version, which was heavily edited, heavily changed by the production by Phil Spector after they broke up. Phil Spector of Be My Baby, the Wall of Sound producer that Brian Wilson tried to sound like and all that, a very important producer, but he's too omnipresent in that project. And then there's the naked version that Paul released in 2003, where all that stuff is stripped away. The Phil Spector version is C. The naked version is B. But them together is an A tier album because you can mix and match. There's this rawness, which like a song like Long and Winding Road, which I've always said is my least favorite Beatles song, but only the Phil Spector version, because I think it's just overly orchestrated. The original song is this cool kind of soft rock, like announcing of what 70s soft rock is going to sound. And so the whole project was this return to rock, which they did super well. Let It Be is like a sappy reunion album that they recorded a year before they broke up. They're like that's the album they should have released in 1978 after getting back together and like doing a bunch of rock and roll. Remember when it used to be simple at the Cavern, at the Rathskeller? No, we're talking like they did that before they even broke up. And so you'd think that the naked version is the best, but Paul took out too much. You see, Phil Spector left in all of these Liverpudlian aspects. So there's a song called Maggie May, which is a Liverpool folk song. Okay. It was about like a robbing prostitute. And you have John singing Danny Boy and making all these cultural references to people I've never heard of because I didn't grow up in England. It's an essential part of the whole album. There's a song called Dig It, which is this beautiful, weird song that fades in and fades out. I've always loved it. For some reason, Paul took it away. And it's all these references. And there's a certain degree to which this is not an album for like love and peace. And do you remember the 60s? This is sort of a coda on Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever. Like, not do you remember the 60s? Do you remember growing up working class in Liverpool? Which makes a song like Two of Us even more beautiful, which was a song that Paul wrote to his wife, but then kind of tweaked so it ended up being more about him and John, which he would then go on to do to John's Ghost with the song Now and Then, which was a song which I think he wrote to Yoko, which Paul changed to make it about him. But anyways, I'm not going to talk more about that song. Just a beautiful song, more harmonies coming back. I've Got a Feeling. We just have this great John and Paul back and forth, two different songs mixed together. Still makes me uncomfortable. Everybody Had a Wet Dream. I remember hearing that in high school and always being uncomfortable. Billy Preston's amazing on this album. He's like the fourth or fifth Beatle. He's great on it. One After 909 is the song they wrote when they were super young. And it's like, it's kind of cheesy, it's kind of bad, but it's sweet because you really understand that this is them saying, hey, do you want to do it one more time before we break up? Sounds good. Okay, goodbye. It's what it is. And also helps you to put into context the Spinal Tap song, Gonna Cry, Cry, Cry All the Way Home, recorded in Squatney. I Me Mine is a beautiful dirge. I actually prefer the Spectre version of that with the wall of sound. Across the Universe is just that moment where you just realize how impossible it is that Paul wrote so much great music. Let It Be Itself, like the Naked version, has this guitar solo that's just so beautiful, ends up being this great coda. You'll see there's one more thing on this list, which is Past Masters. And I'm not going to put it anywhere. Wait, how do I take it out? Damn it. Okay, well, fine. I'm going to put it there, but it belongs everywhere. Okay. Past Masters was a compilation they released in the 80s that takes all of their amazing songs that were not on albums and gives them to you all at once. And the crazy thing is, like, I didn't even know a lot of these songs when I heard them because I only had these albums. So, like, if you want to hear I Want to Hold Your Hand, that's how you had to hear it. Rain, which is an absolute Beatles banger, totally up there. First backwards guitar ever recorded, amazing feeling and sound. Paperback Writer, one of the great AB. Paperback Writer and Rain are sort of like Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever. Just like, how did these two people make music so different and so similar? Super Raw song, like the Ballad of John and Yoko, like it all kind of goes together. So that is something which, you know, realistically belongs in the S tier or the A tier because it has so many great things, but I'm not officially classifying it. Solo albums, they have multiple S tier solo albums. Multiple albums that are as good as Beatle albums. Multiple A tiers. Anyways, I'm going to go to the Record Archive now in Rochester, New York. My last two Beatles videos earned me, through AdSense, $90. I am going to go because my divorce was rough a decade ago, and these are all the Beatles CDs that I have left. So, like, I'm gonna go buy a bunch of Beatles CDs because, like, I don't even have Please Please Me. I don't even have Magical Mystery Tour, and I say that's their third best album. So yeah, I'm gonna go do that. Patreons also give me money, which is sweet. I said, hey, do you want a shout out? And some people said they did. So T Verga wants a shout out. Matthew Brown, I assume, wants a shout out. He didn't respond yet, but he's always a fan of my Beatles stuff. Idol Sun wanted a shout out, and Paolo Mazia wanted a shout out as well. Over on Patreon, I'm going to do an exclusive ranking of their album covers. So that's going to be fun, a super quick video that I'm just going to do over there. So you can join my Patreon if you want to see that. I'm actually just going to check to make sure that no one else said they wanted a shout out before I hit stop on this recording. Let's see here. Oh yeah, Harlan Thater wants one. So there you go. Sweet. Was that it? Did I miss it? Yeah. All right. Cool. Did you enjoy this video? Are you mad at me? Do you love me? Did you learn to love the Beatles? I hope so. Or do you just like some other guy talking about the Beatles because you like talking about it? All right. Till next time. I have no idea how long this video ended up being, but there's the camera.